message up on your screen. Have you? Yeah, I think you have to sort of say, yes, it's okay. It's obviously there's some issues, but we have to agree to be recorded now. Oh yeah, so I'll just rewind a little bit. So last week, Andy talked about integrity, and his talk really stayed with me through the rest of that day, and was just constantly on my mind. And I couldn't really work out why, because I was trying to think, okay, where am I not displaying integrity somewhere? You know, am I a bit false somewhere? You know, what are you actually talking to me about, God? And as you know, we often describe ourselves as people of faith, and we have a bit of a history, Joe and I, of sort of foolishly standing on faith, and putting our faith in God and doing things that don't really make sense to the world, but that we believe God has asked us to do, and we're doing them for His glory and not our own. And we've got many examples of when He's come through and has actually walked with us as we've taken steps of faith, and has fulfilled His faithfulness. And so I was sort of thinking about that, and it just made me think, okay, if I say I am a person of faith, if we say we are people of faith, what does it look like to demonstrate integrity? What does it look like for us as, you know, Jon and Jo, standing in front of you, or sitting today, saying that we are people of integrity, and that we are people of faith? How do we marry those two up? And through this week, I've also been in my readings looking at I don't know if anyone else uses it, the Lectio 365 app that you can get on your phone. And this week it's been looking at Elijah and that famous story of his fun up on the mountaintop with the prophets of Baal, and you know, the two sacrifices and the prophets of Baal summoning Baal, except Baal didn't turn up. Elijah making a bit of fun of them when he didn't, and then sort of doing everything in his own power to make it harder and harder for God to actually answer and burn up his sacrifice, you know, covering it with water loads of times, filling the trenches all around with water. And sure enough, God did honor the faith that Elijah had put in him and burn this up. And so that just sort of coincided this week with me thinking about integrity as a person of faith. And I'm just going to ask Joe to read the last little bit of the story, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen so that you get to see it as well, hopefully. So don't start quite yet, Joe. Right. Okay. So.
Okay, so 1 Kings 18, and then this is the end bit of it, so 41 for the end. Then Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of the abundance of rain." And you'll remember that there hadn't been rain for a number of years. So Ahab went up to eat and drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel. Then he bowed down on the ground, and he put his face between his knees and said to his servant, "Go up now and look toward the sea." So he went up and looked and said, "There's nothing." And 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." Then it came to pass on the 7th time that the man reported, "There is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea." So he said, "Go up and say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and get down before the rain stops you." Now it happened in the meantime that the sky became black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy rain. So Ahab rode away and went to Jezreel. Then the hand of the Lord came upon Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran ahead of Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel.
Okay, sorry that we haven't got the same versions being displayed, but hopefully you got the gist of that. Now, it's a great story, and what it really spoke to me about was that Elijah really was someone who, if you like, put his money where his mouth was. In both examples, really, with the battle with the prophets, he was completely and utterly relying on God. There was no way that he could cause lightning to come down from heaven and burn up the sacrifice. He was just out on a limb, demonstrating his faithfulness in God. And then immediately afterwards, he says to Ahab, "There is the sound of a heavy rain." And this followed a period of doubt that, drought, that had been for a number of years, and the whole of the country was struggling. And so for Elijah to say, "There is the sound of a heavy rain," when there were no clouds in the sky and there was no obvious sign in any way, was a statement of faith. And so, yeah, through this week, I've realized that if we are calling ourselves people of faith, then we need to put our money where our mouths are. And I've been sort of thinking, okay, what does that mean for us as a church? If as a church, we are going to say we are people of faith. And what we believe is that what that means is that we need to display our faith, put it on the line by declaring that God will provide us with a new home. Okay, as you all know, the source is up for sale. That, as far as we know, is all going through. And so it makes us think, okay, you know what? Where are we going to meet? Where are we going to meet as a church? Where are we going to do all of the sort of the ministry that we want to do? Be this community facing and community serving group of people, demonstrating God's love for the community. Where is that going to happen from? And I believe really that through this week, that is what God has really been challenging me and us, and I need to sort of challenge us as a family of God to do, to actually declare, yes, God has got a new home for us lined up, and to stand firm on that declaration. And I believe that as we do that, and as we stand firm on that, he's going to build our faith. We sang in the songs that's sort of what happens. We see it sort of really in that, Elijah, straight from seeing God demonstrate faithfulness by burning up the offering, straight immediately after that, full of faith, he then goes on to the next declaration of faith. And I believe that's who God is, and that's how faith works, that when we start demonstrating faith in God, that builds our faith and encourages us to actually take more steps of faith. And I think the opportunities that are going to be out there for us as a church are massive and are many, and that we will have opportunities to demonstrate faith and to make more and more, take more and more steps of faith. once we've taken this initial one. So what does that actually look like for us? We can say, yes, we've got faith for a new building, but I believe that we actually need to put our faith out there on the line like Elijah did, and that needs to be in the form of a timescale. And what I believe we need to say is that we are going to be in a new building in September. Okay, we as a church, Buxton Church in the Peak, are going to be in a new building in September. Now, I don't know fully what that means. I don't know whether that means our permanent home is going to be where we'll be in September, or it will be somewhere that we can start fulfilling the vision that God has given us for ministry to the community. I don't know the answer to that. What I think I do know is that, and again, this comes back to Elijah's story. What I think I do know is that we have a significant part to play in fulfilling that statement of faith, if you like. That it's not just, okay, we make the statement and then, okay, God, it's over to you. Come and do your stuff, let's see where you have lined up for us. We have a part to play, and our part to play is to pray. I believe that it's what God is asking us to do is to demonstrate in the same way that Elijah, after he'd said, there is the sound of a heavy rain, he then went up the mountain and he prayed. And he prayed repeatedly until his servants saw that cloud the size of a man's fist. And so, in order for us to, if you like, enable the fulfillment of this this statement of faith, what we are actually suggesting is that at 5 to 7 every night we are going to be praying. We're going to be praying for our new building. And we're going to do this for the next 6 weeks, which will take us up to the end of July. And we're going to be doing it on Zoom. And we're going to pray for 5 minutes every night at 5 to 7. And we are going to invite any and all of you who want to, who are able to join with us and to be praying over the next 6 weeks this the fulfillment of this statement of faith. Through it, I believe we are going to see our faith grow. And through it, I believe we are going to see and identify what this building is going to have in it, what the capabilities and the capacity of this building will be, to enable us to start to fulfill the vision that God has given us for our church. So yeah, that's sort of it. Yeah, by all means, join in, Jo.
So 2 Corinthians 5:7, and this is a good way to remember that we're praying at 5 to 7, or it's a good way to remember the verse. 2 Corinthians 5:7, we walk by faith, not by sight. Okay, make a note of that. Okay, now I realise that whatever time we pick is not going to work for some people, Also, if nobody comes, John and I are going to be on Zoom and we'll pray together, or we'll pray with you. No, we're going to do it even if we're the only one on the screen. You don't have to be on the screen. You might be able to set an alarm on your watch. You might be eating, you might be out, you might be working, you might be putting kids to bed. It doesn't matter, but put an alarm on your watch or something in your phone. And you know, the Lord knows, you can pray at other times as well. But as a church, to stand on it, we are going to say we're walking by faith, not by sight. Now, the Lord has blessed us incredibly through the COVID situation as a church. So we are actually financially in a better position coming out of COVID than we were going in, which is a very unusual scenario to have. And it means that we do have options in terms of being able to rent somewhere for some time, if that's the right course of action. I say that not with lack of faith that God is able to provide our permanent home by September. The reason I know he is that exactly 7 years ago today, we landed from leaving Kenya. We landed first early in the morning on the 20th of June, 7 years ago, and we had not a clue. Our 5 passports only got to us because we needed to send John and mine away to get one for Zoe. They all got held up, and they literally arrived with us 48 hours before we got on the flight leaving Kenya. And we saw so many evidences of everything we needed. And last night I sat and I read through this little notebook, and this little notebook is where I made tiny notes of our journey from the day that we landed until the day that God provided us with a home. And it's this home that we're in. And some of you will know the story. And we have never ever lived in a house that looks like this or is this size, not once. And we didn't imagine that we would. We just knew that God was able, that he cared about our kids and he cared about us, and that there was going to be a way through. But doing so looked ridiculous. And it looked ridiculous to wait for God to do it. I'm not saying this to big us up. We only did it because we felt absolutely led to do it, not because we're some super spiritual people. It looked particularly foolish and ridiculous to Christians. And that includes both sets of parents and numbers of people in churches who've known us for many, many years, churches around the country who used to raise the Turning Point. And there is that thing in all of us when we hear somebody expressing a statement of faith that looks ridiculous. There's that sort of caution in us, because sometimes we love that person, sometimes we don't want them to be disappointed, sometimes we think about our own journeys where we've tried to stand or wait for something in faith and it hasn't worked out, or it hasn't seemed to work the way that we thought it was going to. And so we protect ourselves, or we sort of guard in our statements, or we think, gosh, okay, if John is saying that we're going to be meeting somewhere in a building that will enable us to be together and to have somewhere as a focus by September, oh my goodness, we better get on with it. We better start looking. We better do this X, Y, and Z. We better try and make that happen. And that is not, that's not what we need to do. What we need to do is turn and set our eyes on the God who can make it happen. And we found that when we were waiting for somewhere to live, we literally had no idea in the country where it would be, other than that we could only afford in the north. The north is rather large in terms of like, where is a house? And we tried to do things to make it happen. We tried to look near both sets of parents because that made sense. We can't afford to live near either set of parents. What John, particularly as the sort of head of the family, was looking on Zoopla and Rightmove all the time. And every time he did that to try and work out a solution, he got less and less peace and would come to bed stressed. And the times that we had peace were when we turned our eyes to him and said, you are big enough to sort this, and we are not. And it's not that we're just going to sort of chill and go, oh, let's just, be lazy and we just wait for God to drop an answer in our lap. But you can either act out of fear and sort of like, I've got to make this happen, or you can act out of faith. And there are only those two. There's nothing in between. There's 2 lines. You choose faith or you choose fear every time in every decision in your life. And so as a church, and as people leading the church at the moment, we are saying we're choosing faith. Now, John and I, if you like, have a history of this, and it doesn't make it easy, but we can, like David did, recall back, like he did all the time in the Psalms. You know, I'm feeling like this, and this is hard, and this is difficult, but God, I know who you are. I know what you've done. I've seen you come through. And we're fortunate that we can stand on a lot of things in our own personal past. I don't know if you've got those or you haven't, but God is still the same God, and we stand for you. I read through this and I was reminded that there were days when I was full of doubt, and that there were days when my kids were just finding it so difficult, and I was saying to God, are you kidding me? What's going on? Really? Are you really asking this? And it was good to read that and to remember the reality of the journey of getting to where we are now. And that's who we are as people. We go up and down, but God doesn't. And so at 5 to 7, we say, Lord, you're our provider. You're the one who, however small a little congregation we are, loves our heart to have an impact for your kingdom in this place. And so we're trusting you that there's a base for us, that there's somewhere where we can make a start, where we can start reaching people, where we can start gathering together in your name and worshiping, where we can start and we can tell people this is where you can turn up when you're in need of prayer or a chat or whatever. And that all of those are entirely within his will. And so we say, we stand and we walk by faith, not by sight. Okay, so we'll probably put some faith verses together. And yeah, don't feel any obligation to turn up at 5 to 7. We're going to do it anyway, whoever turns up. If you're free, turn up. We are going to be very strict and just keep it to praying to our faithful God for 5 minutes. Otherwise, it will be unmanageable. But that's where we're headed. We're excited about what's happening. There's a number of people in the congregation who are quite stirred up about what the church can be going forward, and how we can not just respond to a lot of stuff in the community where there are needs and there's problems, but actually to be a beacon that is proactively doing things towards the community and towards seeing the kingdom break through and the gospel shine. So we just need a base to enable that, and that a base that is more flexible than the source was, and the Lord knows that. So yeah.
Well, I don't know. Who remembers this? Do people remember that? Have you still got it on your fridges or anything like that? Ours is still on our notice board, and I was going to take it down, but it's got so many pins in it and through it that it might fall apart if I do. But you know that I looked yesterday. This was 3 years ago that we came up with that. Is now the time for the fulfillment of that? I don't know. Fully, I don't know. But we do believe that we're going to be in a home, whether it's temporary or permanent, in September. And so, yeah, our part to play in that is the prayer. And that's what we're going to be doing. So it will be the church Zoom. We'll probably open it at something like 10 to 7, just so, because at 5 to 7, we are going to start praying. And it's not going to be a time for chit chat. It's just going to be a time for, if you like, short, sharp prayers that are actually building our faith. And, maybe while we're praying, you think, oh, God's just given me this idea that it's going to have this space or this capability, or it's going to be in this sort of area or something like that. Great, share it with us, not when we're praying, just send us a message afterwards or something like that. And we will, when we got our house, it followed 6 to 8 weeks of us praying with our kids every night. And you know what kids are like. That as they prayed, they threw in their own requests for what they wanted in the house we were going to end up in. You know, Isaac wanted to have a bedroom that was big enough to have a pool table in. He didn't get that. He got a pool table in a separate room in this house. You know, God gave over and above what Isaac was asking for. You know, there are lots of other ways in which this house answered absolutely specific requests from our kids or from Joe and I. And you know, as Joe said, we have told the story before. We can tell it again, but we don't want to just send you all to sleep. But you know, this is why I said on the message, think about times in your own Christian life where you've sort of taken a bit of a step of faith and you've seen God come through for you. And you know, I hope you have got those. And this is a collective step of faith that we as a church are going to take. And that I believe that the more of us who are involved in these regular prayers, and you know, you won't be able to be involved every time. There'll be some times where, you know, you're cooking the tea at 5 to 7 or whatever, and you know, it might be dangerous to leave the chips on the hob, and you know, what I don't know, but it will grow your faith to be a part of this. It's going to grow our faith to be a part of this, and it will set us up as a church family to really step into all that God has got for us. So yeah, those are the statements of faith we're making.
So I'm reminded, and God's showed me this a number of times in my life. There's a verse in the Psalms where it's talking about the Exodus story when they came out of Egypt, and it says, it's Psalm 77, and it says, "Your way was in the sea, your path was through the waters, but your footsteps were not yet seen." Okay, so there was always a way when they were at the border of the Red Sea and they had sea in front of them and Egyptians behind them. There was always a way. God's footprints were already there. It's just that they couldn't see it with their human eyes. And when Elijah speaks out and says, "There is the sound of heavy rain," you know, there was no sound and there was no rain. But in the spiritual realm, he was trusting who God was. And so we are trusting, and we're saying there are footsteps and there is a path laid for the church and for the future of Church in the Peak and what it will look like, and for the people he will draw to himself. It's just that we don't know where the footsteps are yet as we stand sort of at the bank, if you like. But we can trust who he is. And I just read Deuteronomy 7:9 to you. It says this: "Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps his covenant and steadfast love with those who love him, and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations." Okay, so fantastic promises of faithfulness. We just have a choice whether to believe them or to sort out our lives for ourselves. And so we're going to believe them and stand on them.
Amen.